Hello, everybody, and welcome again to this Cradle conversation. My name is Laura Halpin, and I am recording from my home in Walnut Creek, California, which is on the stolen land of the Bay Miwoks. I am honored and thankful to have my guest, KERRA Bolton, in conversation today. So I just wanted to welcome you before I introduce you.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Same, thank you. I love knowing you and the little bit that I do, and what I've learned about you and your work. As I've said before during our collective health conversation, that there was something very magnetic about who you are and what you're up to. And so I'm happy to be in conversation with you. And I just wanted to share that KERRA is a journalist, she's a writer, she's a documentarian filmmaker, and she is in the midst of a documentary, really an amazing project called The Return of the Black Madonna. And it was this project that kind of drew me in. And I'm wondering, before we start, if you could share a little bit about that project. And I know that the coronavirus has thrown a major wrench into the progress that you can make. So can you tell us a little bit about your work?
Sure. Well, since 2016, I've really started being haunted by images of slave ships. And I was working on a docu-series last year that ended up evolving into what is now Return of the Black Madonna, which is my quest to learn to swim, dive, and map sunken slave ships as a form of individual and collective healing, because I believe that a lot of what we are facing today in the United States, especially African Americans, Black Americans, has to do with slavery and the slave trade. And while we know a lot about, or we know some about, of course, we know a lot about slavery in the United States, and we know some about the conditions that led Africans to sell their captive people. What we don't know, or what we don't know as much as I would like to know, is what happened in that middle passage, that place in the ocean between Africa and the Americas. Now, when I say we don't know, I'm exaggerating a little, because there are accounts written by slave traders, there are accounts written by slaves or enslaved people, there are accounts written by historians. So there is a body of knowledge out there about this particular time. For me, what's missing is a lived experience and an embodied experience.
I remember in our first conversation, you were talking about your experience it was an African American museum. Was it in Detroit?
Yeah, yes.
Because that embodied experience just flashes me back to that experience. And would you mind, I know this is off script, but would you mind just sharing that?
So I had been hired along with Cassidy Friedman, who is a documentary filmmaker out of San Francisco, the Bay Area. We were hired to do a docu-series about restorative practices in Detroit. And restorative practices is a growing social movement, social science that promotes repairing harm, rebuilding relationships, and building social capital. And one of the places where restorative practices is being embedded in the city is Detroit. So while there, we were filming a group of teenagers who met to talk about how they could use restorative practices in their classrooms, in their neighborhoods, with their families. And it was being held at the African American History Museum in Detroit. So during a break, I took a walk and wanted to see this wonderful exhibit, which traces the migration of Black Americans from a fictional place community in West Africa and Detroit. And
Wow.
one of the most moving parts of the exhibit is they did a replica of a slave ship and the hull of the slave ship. And they have these noises, like these screams and these groans of what it would have been like for the slaves who were manacled. They were chained wrist to leg. And there were thousands of them in the belly of the ship. And I fell to my knees and I started sobbing because I was experiencing race memory. And even though I had not directly lived this experience, I had a memory of it. And it just, I was on the floor sobbing. I felt their pain so viscerally. And I was a little embarrassed because I hoped that nobody would come by and just see me on the floor crying. And I picked myself up and I asked Cassidy to come with me. And while the museum wouldn't let us film the exhibit, they let us collect sound because there was something about the sound that was also really haunting for me. And so for Cassidy and me as a creative team, that was the first step of this journey that we're now taking together.
Thank you for sharing that. I haven't heard of race memory before. I've heard of generational trauma, and I don't know if that is that kind of the same thing?
Yeah, it is. And part of the book that I'm writing, the memoir that I'm writing, as well as the film, is about generational trauma and how we address it. And I make a connection between fear of swimming among African Americans and generational trauma collected through slavery.
I can't wait till both projects are completed.
I can't wait either. I would say we're done now.
I know. Well, I will definitely put in, when I share the conversation, I'll put in links to your website so people can learn more about both your book, Water in My Bones, and The Return of the Black Madonna.
Yeah.
So we are in conversation the day after the day after George Floyd was killed. And so I just want to just put our conversation in the context of today. And I think that the questions that I want to ask you, I just want them to be embedded in where we are in this moment. You don't have to talk about them, but I just feel like it's important, since I'll be sharing this conversation after the fact. I just kind of want to define the context.
Sure.
So these cradle conversations are intended to cultivate community and connection, comfort, courage that come for me from being in a place and being in a place of truth, hearing truth, no matter what it is. And so it's my hope that those watching and coming close in connection with us will feel held by our connection, will feel connected, and will be part of a conversation that I'm hoping is cultivating a vision for what's next. You know, where do we go from here in this time of like radical uncertainty? And so my question with all of that lead in is, in this time, what is cradling you?
I find it interesting that during a time of COVID, of a global pandemic, like racism doesn't change. Like it's still prevalent. That's the one thing that is continuing. Places are closed. The way we communicate and learn and work is all changing. But you know what doesn't change? Racism. That is astounding to me. But in response to your question, what cradles me is my ancestors and the work that I'm doing now and the community that I have that is showing up for me and that loves me.
Yeah. I remember watching a podcast or a conversation that you participated in, and you introduced yourself as an ancestor being. Mm-hmm. And I just, that kind of connection that you carry with you is really remarkable to me.
Well, they show up on my doorstep. So my friend Juliet, who is a writer in New York, said, I want to send you this book. I know you're writing your memoir. She's in my writing group. And I thought she was going to send me a memoir writing book that was kind of going to be instructional. And she sent me this. So it's called The Middle Passage by Tom Feelings. And I know it is reversed.
No, I see it. Well, I see it. I don't know if it will.
It's gorgeous. Look at this.
Wow.
It is this gorgeous illustrated book documenting the Middle Passage. It was first published in 1995 and then republished in 2017. And I tried to sit with it yesterday, but the news of the day, and it was just bubbling too much, and I couldn't sit down with it. So I put it by my bed, and this morning I woke up around 6:30, and I opened the book and I just started reading and looking at the illustrations. And I will probably do this for like the next couple of months because the illustrations are so rich that you could stare at one for at least an hour. And I'm like, okay, so my ancestors showed up. They were tired of me. They were tired of waiting for me. So they were going to come to me. And like, you're not doing your work. Here is the work. We're going to send you a book. You have to show up for us. So, so that is my work in this time. And it's difficult because like everybody else, I'm running around going, well, what can I do? What can I write? What needs to be organized? You know, there's that reaction of like wanting to cuss people out in a post in Facebook. Like there's all this stuff. And that's not what I'm supposed to be doing. You know, for me, it's like, you know, part of being an ancestor being is listening when they talk. And by the fact that they showed up literally on my doorstep via Amazon yesterday, they're just saying, you have work to do.
Yeah.
You have deep work to do.
Yeah. Don't forget.
And don't forget. And so we all have deep work to do. Mm-hmm. To me, that is what this time is about, because you cannot get to the sustainable change until we all do that deep work.
I love that your ancestors cradle you and your work cradles you, but your work really is this cultivation of connection with your ancestors. And so it's, you know, I just appreciate that. Yeah, I can see that like even now, even today, your work is us.
Yes.
Yeah, I could see how that would be cradling. My picture just went off.
I did.
Here I am. I don't know how to... Hello, ancestors.
Those are not my ancestors.
Yeah. Maybe it's mine. So thank you for that. It just is such a central part of you that I appreciate you bringing that into this conversation. Do you have a cradle to offer us?
I'm thinking about that because I'm trying to think, what is it that I can offer the community in terms of a cradle? I don't think anything comes to mind, not just yet, because what needs to be nourished and nurtured is changing moment to moment. And what is needed now, it might be different than what I might have offered a week or two ago.
Yeah. And I think that...
Is that okay?
Oh yeah, there's... But I think that even you reminding us of the reality of this ever-changing, you know, like every day, every hour is different, and just reminding us of that is somehow, you know, it's scary, and it's also cradling because it's the truth, you know. So yeah.
I mean, like I might have wanted to offer a poem or a song or something, but it's not hitting me, not other than Nina Simone's Mississippi Goddamn, if you ever want to listen to that song. She's so angry at that song, and I get it. You know, I would have wanted to offer that, but I'm just so exhausted from the feeling of being hunted that I don't have a cradle because I'm trying to find that cradle within myself.
Yeah.
And so that's why reading the book about the Middle Passage, and I'm seeing what my ancestors, a depiction of what they might have endured, gives me strength, because I know that their blood is in my blood and their DNA is in my DNA, and their courage to endure is in mine. I mean, we're talking about there was between 10 and 12 million Africans transported from West Africa to the Americas between the 16th and the 19th century. I don't know which one mine was, but I survived that. Like my ancestor survived that. And so, you know, I draw my strength from that, but at the same time, I have to find what my strength is, because, you know, they didn't have social media on the boat. They didn't have the kinds of issues that I'm facing are not the same kinds of issues they faced. But we can draw on hope and courage and perseverance.
I also just really appreciate you acknowledging your capacity to offer, you know, like there's good reason that there's nothing to offer. You know, I think your presence is a really powerful offering. And so I really I just welcome the absence of a cradle to offer. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just stupefied by the persistence. You know, we talked about George Floyd's death, Amy Cooper calling the cops on Christian Cooper for asking him, he asked her to leash her dog, which is according to law in New York. Like recent deaths of Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor. It's the sense of being hunted. It's the sense of being hunted. So it's like, I don't really have anything to cradle.
No.
So that means we're going to have a different conversation, but it means we're going to have
fine.
A good one.
Yeah. Okay, so this is my next question.
Sure.
The next question is there something that we can practice?
I am a big meditation person. I definitely believe in meditation. I don't meditate as consistently as I would like, but I do believe in prayer and meditation. I believe in stillness. I believe in meditation because not only are you cultivating stillness, but more importantly, you're cultivating receptivity and being receptive to what the universe has to offer, being receptive to the messages that your soul is giving you, being receptive to new strategies, being receptive to stories. All of that wants to come and partner with you. But a lot of times our egos and our stories that we've said this is the way life is gets in the way of that. So for me, I just have a meditation, quite like the meditation that you offered before we started recording. It's just sort of imagining that I'm connected to Mother Earth through roots. I also, in my meditation, imagine this sort of beam of light that grows from the crown of my head up into the stars, so that I'm almost stretched between the earth and the stars, to remind me that I'm both stardust and I'm both grounded.
Beautiful. That's very cradling. Just the repetition of the word. Sorry, somebody's dispensing ice in the next room. The receptivity, you know, I think that is so counter to what we are trained, for the lack of a better word, to do. Like, we just drive and drive and drive and drive. And when we rest, when we're in stillness, there are messages that suggest that, can you hear my dog snoring?
It's gonna be that kind of party. I heard something, but I was just like, well, whatever.
It's not me. Yeah, Stella has no problem resting.
The dog's like, I'll listen to you guys talk. I'm taking it.
So to be reminded that there's so much that happens when we're in a state of stillness. You know, it is active, just like sleep is, you know. And so I think that is really powerful, and I'm so glad that you brought it up. So thank you.
Yeah.
The last question is, do you have a vision or a blessing for the collective?
Yes.
Yeah. Can't wait to hear it.
Courage. Courage. This is not the time for guilt. It is not the time for hand wringing. It's not the time for feeling heartbroken, even though that is a natural response. This is a time for courage. This is a time for really digging deep within ourselves and challenging ourselves to act and be in ways that we have not before, in ways that make us not comfortable. Cassie, my director, laughs whenever I say that I am scared shitless every time I'm in the pool or have to go underneath the water. I've set this super high goal for myself. It's like saying I'm gonna climb Mount Kilimanjaro and I'm crawling. So I have to find courage in myself. And we all have to find courage in ourselves. We've been lulled to complacency, and we think that comfort is the goal of our lives, and it is not. The goal of our lives is to be awake and alive. And you cannot be that if you are complacent and comfortable. And so people talk about wanting these things to end, whether it's racism or the divisiveness in the United States or whatever it is, and they have to have courage for it to happen. And it's not going to be that person out there or that book that you're going to read or that guru or that TED talk. It's going to be the day to day in yourself courage to keep going, to keep fighting, to say the thing that nobody else in the room wants to say, but it's the truth. And people aren't gonna like you when you say the truth. But your goal again is not to be liked. You didn't come here to be liked. Came here to be awake and alive. And so my goal or my vision is for more people to be awakened, not woke, but to be awakened and alive to do this work. And so I think the thing that I'm offering is not a cradle necessarily, because I do believe we need a cradle and a chalice and a place to hold and a place to gather. And that's why I love what you're doing and I love why you're doing it. But in that cradle, we have to shake it up a little bit.
That was really powerful.
Thank you. I feel like I'm not answering your questions the right way. You're like, do you have a cradle? And I'm like, no, I'm
I don't care. You know, it's kind of like the questions provide a structure for a conversation that can go anywhere at once. And so I really, like, I invite this and I welcome it. So, and I love, you know, your vision is for us to be courageous. And I love that you're giving us an example in what you have set out to accomplish, that you're going to dive for sunken slave ships and you're still learning how to swim.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that kind of like plodding along, you know, that we may have this end goal, but it starts with the like putting a face in the water and you're scared shitless, you know. And so I really, yeah.
That's what this work is, because like in the United States, especially, I don't know about other countries, even though I'm living in Mexico, it's like there is this sense of the big moment, right? Like we're all just waiting for that big moment, that mountaintop moment to happen. And the mountaintop moment doesn't happen until we take the small steps.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Thank you.
And that's where our lives are, right? Like it's the messiness of our lives is in the small steps. It's in the day-to-day. It's in that courage that we find. And sometimes you have to trick yourself into finding courage. So during COVID-19, I have reframed it from I'm lonely and being quarantined by myself, and I'm facing this whole ass pandemic, which I call it, by myself, into, okay, so this is an indefinite bed and breakfast artist retreat for one. It's like, and some days I wake up and I'm like, this shit again. Like, I'm so tired of this shit again. And I'm like, yeah, but you know what? You can make sugar cookies and have sugar cookies for breakfast. And I'm like, sugar cookies. It's like, but you can only have the sugar cookies when you get in the shower and you take a shower and you get dressed, and then you can have sugar cookies. And I know that sounds stupid, but it's that one thing, in this case, it's the sugar cookies, that gives me the animus, the courage to just go to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing.
Yeah.
And so that's what I want people to do. I want people, instead of looking at all of the things about race in the United States or poverty or whatever the issue is, gun violence, and feeling defeated and powerless, that they can't fight, is to find your sugar cookie of courage and eat it and allow it to nourish you, allow it to sweeten you, to enjoy it.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to go all over the place.
You're just great. So before we stop, I just want to call everyone close that is listening across space and time. And I really want us to let that be receptive to your vision of being courageous, that challenge to live in the moment, awake and alive. I just welcome everyone to just like let that settle in a little bit more deeply. And without looking for the huge moments, but just the day-to-day. So thank you so much for that, KERRA.
Thank you, Laura.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I hope to talk to you soon.
Yes, that would be awesome.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Welcome.